In this section, we're going to take a look at recording audio within Studio One. Now, one of the very first things that you'll want to do is be sure that you set the proper gain levels on your audio interface. You want to be sure that you don't have clipping at your audio interface, and every audio interface is different in how it lets you know that information, so you'll need to pay close attention to that. But what I will typically do is play the loudest passage of whatever the instrument, or if it's a vocal part, the loudest passage of that song, and then be sure that you're not clipping on that part. Then you should be pretty much set for the other areas. Now, we can always at any time take a look at our settings for the song by coming to Song and Song Setup, and then we can see that under the General tab, our sample rate, resolution, and make any adjustments if we need to. And then we have our audio input and output setup, which we've taken a look at in a previous section. We can see our signal coming here, so everything is good to go for me. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. So the next thing that we want to do is create an audio track, and I'll press T on my QWERTY keyboard to open up the Add Tracks dialog, and let's just call this Vocal. And we want to choose the correct type, which is audio. You can then select how many tracks that you'd like to add. If you're, say, recording a live drum set and you've got 6 or 7 or 8 mics, then you can add all 8 of those tracks at one time. But I'm just going to leave this set to 1. And the format, I'm going to choose mono because I'm just using a single mic to capture my narration. We can then choose the input, and I'll leave that on input, the left input. Then at this point we can click OK, and we have our audio track added. And let me close out the browser real quick for a bit more space here. So the next thing is we have our input, and just know that we have these controls here in the track column for our audio tracks, that at any time we can choose a different input, as well as accessing the audio input and output setup. And then with this button here, we can change from mono to stereo by clicking. And we then have our record arm here and monitoring. And by default, as soon as we arm, then the monitoring will be turned on, and I'm going to turn that off since I am here. It's a bit distracting to hear that back, but Studio One is set up by default to automatically actively monitor. So if you don't want that, then you would just click here. The monitoring is going to be useful in a situation where if you have a singer and they prefer to record their vocals with a touch of reverb or something like that, some sort of effect that's going to help them feel more comfortable, then you want to be sure that you go ahead and activate the monitoring so that they can hear that effect, that reverb. But then you're also going to have to take into consideration the latency settings. So if we come to Studio One and Options, and then under the Audio Setup tab, you'll want to pay attention to whatever your device block size is. And if there's a delay in the reverb or the effect or hearing back the vocal, then you can just go ahead and lower that block size. Since I'm using the built-in Windows Audio, I would click on the control panel and I can lower the latency here. If you're using an audio interface, then you should have a slider here, as we've seen earlier, to make that adjustment. And I'll go ahead and cancel out. And another area to be aware of is if I F3 to open up the console, we have an inputs button here. And when we click that, we can actually see the inputs that are available on our audio interdevice and the levels that are currently coming in for our signal. And also, if you have a situation where you'd like to record and have an effect printed to that recorded audio, you can choose to add that effect here. So if I wanted to use some compression on whatever I'm recording, then we can come to the top here, click on the plus button, and then put a compressor on that channel. But just keep in mind, whatever you use here is going to be printed to the audio. There's no way that you're not going to be able to get rid of it if you apply effects using this input section. But just be aware that this is available here. I'm going to open that compressor up and just remove that out, and let's hide our input panel and come back to the arrange view. So now at this point I can use the asterisk on my QWERTY keyboard to enter into record, and we can see our levels or the audio recording here in real time. We know that we're in record because our song position cursor is red, and I'll press the space bar to stop, come back to the beginning of our song, and we can see we now have our audio recording. To enter into record, and we can see our levels or the audio record. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this part out. Now, we also can loop record. Say we have a song that we've created and we're trying to get a part just right with our bass, and it's a particularly tough part, and so we keep or we would like to loop over and over to try to get the best performance. We can set up a loop. So if I set up a 2-bar loop here, and then let's go ahead and activate that loop. And I'm going to Alt Shift and R to open up our record panel. You can Option Shift and R on the Mac. And by default, this will usually be on record mix, but let's choose record takes, because with each passage, we want this to add each loop in addition to the previous one instead of overriding the other one. So now when I enter into a record in this mode, we're going to do each take, and then these will be separated out as into separate takes, which we can see here in the bottom left hand corner. We have these horizontal bars, and that's just letting you know that we're setting up different takes for each pass through that we're making. So then at this point, when I stop recording, we can click on this button here in the bottom left corner and see each passage that was done, and then we can choose whichever one that we would like. And if we right click on this audio event, we have the option to unpack those takes. So if we'd like to send them to new layers or to entirely new tracks, we have the option to do that here. Let's first take a look at the tracks to new layers. I'll go ahead and select that. Now we can see each pass through of my narration is down below. And now that we have these new layers, we don't need to use this to choose our take up above. If we'd like, we can actually play back the different layers by using solo, and then when we find the one that we'd like, we can just use the up arrow here, and that's going to push take 4 is now up in our original track, and this is the one that will be played back. Now if we were using something like a bass guitar or an instrument and where certain parts are better in different takes, we can actually comp these. So now we have this bracket when we hover within these different takes, and we can simply click, hold, and drag to select a portion of that take, and then now that's going to be added up above. So if we were doing better at the beginning of this take, we can select that portion there, and then that will be pushed up to the top. Just notice that when we're comping here, we are going to make use of the snap settings. So right now we're set to 16th note and our snap is turned on. So you can see, let me actually change that to quarter note, and you can see our cursor is snapping to quarter note. If you don't want that behavior, just turn off the snap, and you can see you can freely select and have more fine control over which section you'd actually like to use as your comp. I'll go ahead and click and drag, and then we can see that's then pushed forward. So now we have different segments from our different takes, the ones that we feel are the best, all on our original track, and then these are what's going to be played back as our performance. And we still have these take selection buttons in the bottom left corner of each one, each of our comps that we've chosen, and we can click on those and choose a different take as well. Okay, and so that is how we can go about recording our audio within Studio One.